It was one of those quiet Friday evenings where the world outside seemed to slow down. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted from the long hours of the week, and all I wanted was some peace. My name's Jake, and in my mid-30s, I've learned to appreciate the quiet more than anything. I imagined the rest of the evening playing out the same as it usually did. Crack open a beer, mindlessly flip through TV channels, and unwind. But that night, the normal rhythm of things was interrupted. The shift began when Emma, my stepmom, mentioned she had invited her old friend, Sarah, over for dinner. Emma, who's in her mid-50s, is one of those women who ages gracefully, elegant and poised, with a natural confidence. Sarah, I remembered, was much like her, though it had been years since I'd seen her. Emma and Sarah had been college friends, but life had pulled them apart. They hadn't seen each other in quite some time, and it seemed like they were both looking forward to catching up over dinner and a few glasses of wine. For me, I thought it was the perfect chance to keep a low profile. Let them enjoy their nostalgia while I stayed in the background, maybe slipping away once the conversation turned into old stories I'd heard too many times before. They arrived around 7 in the evening, both women glowing with excitement. Emma, in her sleek black dress, greeted me warmly. She looked more polished than usual, her hair done up, her makeup light but carefully applied. Sarah, in a striking red blouse, was just as vibrant as I remembered, her smile easy and carefree. There was something different about her, though, a kind of liveliness I hadn't noticed before. She carried herself with the same light-hearted confidence, but tonight it felt more electric. The conversation flowed effortlessly between the two of them, the room filling with laughter and memories from years ago. I let myself fade into the background, enjoying the energy without getting too involved. But as the evening progressed, something started to change. The air grew warmer, not just from the wine and the comfort of old friends, but from something else entirely, something subtle and unsettling. By the time 9 o'clock rolled around, we had all moved into the living room. The house felt cozier than it had just a few hours ago. The three of us gathered on the couch. I sat quietly, trying to stay out of their way, but I could feel it, the shift in the atmosphere. I had just gone to fetch us another round of drinks when I overheard Sarah say something that made me pause. "You know, Emma," she said with a teasing laugh, "Jake has really grown into quite the man, and handsome too." The compliment was innocent enough, but there was something in the way she said it, something that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. Emma chuckled, but I noticed a similar change in her tone. "Oh, come on, Sarah," Emma replied, her voice playful but carrying an undercurrent of something else. "He's just my stepson." The words lingered in the air, heavy and suggestive. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just the wine talking, but when I returned to the living room with the drinks, I saw Sarah looking at me differently. Her smile was warm, but there was something more behind it, a teasing challenge that sent a strange thrill through me. "Why don't you join us, Jake?" Sarah said, patting the empty space on the couch between them. Her voice was light, almost too casual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. I sat down between them, doing my best to appear nonchalant, but I couldn't ignore the tension that now buzzed between the three of us. Emma and Sarah kept talking, reminiscing about their college days, but every now and then I felt Sarah's eyes on me, watching, waiting. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then Sarah's hand rested on my knee. It was a small gesture, almost innocent, but her fingers lingered for just a moment too long. My heart started to race. I glanced at Emma, half expecting her to say something, to break the strange tension that had formed, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled at me, her gaze steady and knowing. The air grew heavier with every second, the playful banter between them taking on a new edge, a flirtation I hadn't seen coming. Sarah leaned in closer, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, "You know, Jake, there's something about you tonight, something very appealing." I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. Sarah's words hung in the air, thick with implications I wasn't sure how to process. Before I could even think of how to respond, Emma's hand joined in, resting on my other knee. Her touch was warm and deliberate, almost as if she knew exactly what she was doing. I looked between them, expecting someone to break the moment with a laugh or a casual comment, But instead, Emma leaned in closer, her lips brushing my cheek. The tension that had been simmering all night finally broke through. It felt suffocating, yet exhilarating at the same time. I couldn't tell what was happening or why I wasn't stopping it. Sarah smiled at me, her eyes sparkling with something mischievous as her fingers traced a slow path up my leg. Emma, still close, whispered softly in my ear, her voice dripping with nostalgia. "We used to have so much fun back in the day, Sarah and I," Emma teased, her tone laced with something deeper. "Isn't that right?" Sarah chuckled, the sound low and suggestive. "Oh yes," she said, leaning in closer, her lips now inches from mine. "Wild times." I felt like I was drowning in the moment, caught between them, not sure what to do or say. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, and before I knew it, Sarah's lips were on mine. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, testing the waters, but when I didn't pull away, it deepened. Her tongue flicked against mine, teasing, coaxing a response from me that I couldn't hold back. As if on cue, Emma's hand moved to my neck, her fingers brushing the sensitive skin there, sending shivers down my spine. The sensation of her touch, coupled with Sarah's kiss, was overwhelming. My mind was screaming that this was wrong, that I should stop, but my body was lost in the moment, caught up in the heat between us. Then, Emma's lips found mine, soft and slow, stealing a kiss before Sarah could react. It was a different kind of kiss, deeper, more deliberate. My heart raced as I shifted between the two of them, Sarah's hands still exploring me while Emma took her time, savoring the moment. It was as if they had silently agreed to share, working in unison, each touch, each kiss heightening the intensity. The contrast between them was dizzying. Sarah's touch was more playful, insistent, her hands exploring with a kind of reckless abandon. Emma's touch, on the other hand, was slower, more measured, but no less intense. It was like they knew exactly how to complement each other, each playing their part in this strange, electrifying moment. Sarah's lips found my neck, trailing kisses down toward my collarbone, while Emma anchored me with her steady, calculated touches. Every nerve in my body felt alive, tingling under their combined attention. It was surreal, unlike anything I had ever experienced. The tension in the room built with every passing second, the air growing warmer, the fire inside me burning hotter as they both closed in. Emma's hand slid down my chest, her fingers dancing over my skin in a way that made me tremble. She smiled, sensing my reaction, and leaned in again, her kiss more urgent this time. Not to be outdone, Sarah followed suit, her hands more confident now, as they moved over me. Then, Sarah pulled back for just a moment, a teasing smile curving her lips as she glanced over at Emma. "Shall we take this somewhere more comfortable?" Sarah asked, her voice low and filled with suggestion. I didn't need to be asked twice. The next thing I knew, we were all standing, and they were leading me down the hallway toward the bedroom. My heart pounded in my chest, anticipation building with every step. The air between us was electric, humming with the energy of what was about to happen. Once we were in the bedroom, the soft glow of a bedside lamp cast everything in a warm amber light. Sarah made the first move, pushing me gently onto the bed, her hands quickly finding their way to my shirt, pulling it over my head with practiced ease. Emma was close behind, her hands already exploring my bare chest, her fingers tracing patterns that sent waves of pleasure through me. Sarah climbed on top of me, her eyes filled with mischief as she leaned down to kiss me again, harder this time, her hands gripping my arms as her body pressed against mine. Emma watched closely, her own hands still moving over my skin, teasing and taunting. The sensation of their combined touches was overwhelming. Every nerve in my body was on fire, my senses overloading from the intensity of it all. Sarah's fingers slipped to the waistband of my pants, teasing me just enough to make my breath hitch, while Emma kissed her way down my neck, her lips soft and warm against my skin. "Looks like you're enjoying this, Jake," Sarah whispered, her voice laced with seduction as she sat up, a smirk playing on her lips. "Why don't we keep going?" Sarah's words hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in seduction. I could barely manage a nod, still reeling from the intensity of their combined attention. Sarah leaned back in, her hands moving lower as Emma's lips pressed against my neck, her kiss softer but filled with a kind of urgency I wasn't used to from her. The room felt impossibly warm, the tension between us thick enough to choke on. I was caught in the middle of it all, completely at their mercy, unable to resist or stop what was happening. And I didn't want to. My mind kept flashing back to how surreal this moment was, but every time I thought of pulling away, Sarah's fingers would brush my skin, or Emma's lips would find a new spot, and I'd lose myself all over again. Sarah climbed back on top of me, her body pressing against mine as her hands roamed freely, her touch confident and teasing. I could feel her smile against my skin as she kissed me, and every touch, every kiss felt like it was driving me further and further toward the edge of something I wasn't sure I could control. Emma, never far, was slower, more deliberate. Her fingers traced a path over my chest, her touch calming in contrast to Sarah's more aggressive playfulness. Yet, together, it was overwhelming, an assault on my senses that made my breath catch in my throat. I didn't know where one ended and the other began. It was like they had become this seamless, intoxicating rhythm that I was helpless to stop. Sarah's lips found my ear, her breath hot and teasing as she whispered, "I told you. You're in for a wild ride, Jake." My pulse quickened, the words sending a jolt of anticipation through me. Emma's hand moved lower, her fingers brushing against my skin in a way that made me shudder. I glanced at her, and she smiled softly, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Desire, yes, but there was more there. Almost a kind of satisfaction, like she had been waiting for this moment just as much as I had. I was drowning in them, in their touches, their lips, their hands guiding me through the heat that was rising between us. The world outside the bedroom had faded to nothing. There was only this moment, only us. Sarah's hands moved lower still, teasing me just enough to make my breath catch, while Emma's lips continued to press softly against my skin. The two of them worked in perfect sync, their movements complementing each other in a way that made me dizzy with want. It felt like they had planned this, like they knew exactly how to drive me wild. "You've been waiting for this," Sarah whispered, her voice low and teasing as she leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "Haven't you, Jake?" I couldn't answer, my breath shallow, my heart pounding. But they didn't need an answer. They already knew. The rest of the night felt like a blur, a haze of touches, kisses, and whispered promises. I lost myself in them completely, surrendering to the moment in a way I had never done before. It was more than just desire. It was a connection, an unspoken understanding that we were all part of something bigger than ourselves in that moment. When it was over, the room was quiet again, the tension that had filled the air for hours finally dissipating into something calmer, something more peaceful. Sarah lay beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, her breath steady against my skin. Emma curled up on the other side, her fingers still gently tracing patterns on my chest. We didn't say anything for a long time. There was no need for words. We all knew what had just happened, and that it had changed everything. But for now, in the soft light of the morning beginning to creep through the curtains, there was a sense of peace. A sense that we had crossed a line, yes, but in doing so had found something deeper, something that would stay with us long after this night was over. Eventually, Sarah lifted her head, her eyes meeting mine with a tired but satisfied smile. "That was something," she said, her voice soft and filled with exhaustion. I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. "Yeah, it was." Emma smiled, her fingers playing softly with mine. "We should probably talk about this," she said, her voice gentle but serious. Sarah propped herself up on one elbow, looking between the two of us. "Yeah, I think we should. That was intense, and I don't want things to get weird between us." I swallowed, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "Yeah, we should talk. I don't want this to change things in a bad way." Emma's gaze softened, her voice calm and reassuring. "It doesn't have to," she said. "We can decide what this means for us. It doesn't have to be a one-time thing, or it can be whatever feels right." Sarah looked thoughtful for a moment, nodding in agreement. "Exactly. We need to be on the same page. Tonight was incredible, but we have to figure out what it means moving forward. The conversation that followed was surprisingly easy, considering what had just happened. We talked openly and honestly about where we stood and what this meant for our relationships. There was no awkwardness, just a shared understanding that something powerful had happened between us, and that it had shifted the dynamic in a way we couldn't ignore. By the time the conversation wound down, the tension from earlier had completely dissipated. We had set clear boundaries, and we all felt comfortable with what had happened. It wasn't something we were going to make a regular thing, but it wasn't something we regretted either. It was a moment we would cherish, but one that didn't define us. As the first rays of morning light began to filter through the curtains, I lay there between them, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. What had happened tonight had been intense, yes, but it had also been about more than just desire. It had been about trust, communication, and connection. We had crossed a line, but in doing so, we had found something deeper. As I drifted off to sleep, feeling the warmth of their bodies next to mine, I realized that whatever came next, we would face it together, with the same openness and honesty that had brought us to this point. As the first rays of morning light began to filter through the curtains, I lay between Emma and Sarah, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. The intensity of the night before had dissipated, replaced by a quiet calm that washed over the room. It felt surreal, but not in a way that made me uncomfortable. If anything, it was grounding, a reminder of the connection we had just shared, one that went beyond the physical. Emma rested her head on my chest, her fingers lightly tracing patterns on my skin. Her touch was gentle, a soft contrast to the heat and passion we had all experienced just hours before. Sarah lay beside me, her head on my shoulder, her breath soft and steady against my neck. The room was still, the warmth of their bodies next to mine a comforting presence. I glanced at Emma, her face serene, her eyes half closed but focused on me with an expression that was both tender and satisfied. Sarah, too, seemed content, her lips curved in a small, sleepy smile. The night had been unexpected, intense, and it had changed the dynamic between the three of us in ways I couldn't fully comprehend yet. We had crossed a line, one that we all knew would have lasting consequences. But for now, it didn't feel like something to regret. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a bond that had been strengthened, not broken, by what had happened. As I lay there, the warmth of their bodies surrounding me, I realized that the night had been about more than just desire. It had been about trust, communication, and connection. We had shared something intimate, something raw and real, and it had deepened our relationships with each other in ways that couldn't easily be explained. Emma shifted beside me, her fingers intertwining with mine, and I could feel the steady rise and fall of her breathing as she settled in closer. Sarah snuggled into my side, her hand resting on my chest, her body still close to mine. It felt comfortable, like we belonged there together in that moment. I closed my eyes, letting myself relax into the feeling of contentment that washed over me. There was no need for words now. Everything that needed to be said had already been spoken. We had been honest with each other, vulnerable in ways we hadn't been before. And that honesty had brought us closer, not torn us apart. The future felt open, filled with possibilities I hadn't considered before. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face it. Whatever came our way, we would handle it together, with the same openness and honesty that had brought us to this point. As I drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the warmth of Emma and Sarah, I knew that things would never be the same. But I also knew that whatever came next, we would face it as a team, with a deeper understanding of each other and the bond that had been forged between us. And in that moment, as sleep overtook me, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that I wasn't alone. We had crossed a line, yes, but we had done so together, and that made all the difference.